Hi, I'm Alan Bizzuti. You're listening to The Other Side of the Bell.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to everything trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We'll help you take your trumpet playing to the next level. I'm John Snell, trumpet specialist here at Bob Reeves Brass, and I'll be your host for this episode. Joining me today is trumpeter, composer, educator, and entrepreneur Dave Douglas. We'll get to Dave's interview here in a moment after a word from our sponsor and some trumpet news. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. Well, here we are in the middle of August already. I can't believe it. My son just started band camp here, ready to go into high school marching band. So school's getting back into session here in the U.S. and probably folks in Europe are coming back from their holidays and getting back to the swing of things, so to speak, to finish up 2025. Man, these years are just flying by. I mean, it's crazy to think we've been doing this podcast for 13 years. And funny enough, my guest today started his podcast within a week of when The Other Side of the Bell started. So great minds think alike. So we'll talk to Dave about that a little bit coming up here. Not a whole lot of news here. We got some great horns coming in from Shires and Van Laar in stock. If you can see behind me, we have a great selection of guard bags. If you're looking for a guard bag, particularly the triples, we have a lot of triples right now. We have some singles. Actually, we have everything. We have wheelies, singles, doubles, triples. The only thing we're out of now, I believe, is the 9 series, the trumpet and flugel double. So those, I think we have one left, but I think those are pretty easy to find from the other dealers. But if you're looking for a single, double, triple, or one of the quad wheelie guard bags, we have them in stock. And I think we have a fiberglass double. It's not on the website. So if any podcast listeners are interested in the fiberglass series from Guard, shoot me an email and you can pick those rare, hard to find fiberglass guard bags. On the mouthpiece front, I mean, we're just cranking away. We just shipped a big order to Japan, to Joy Brass out there, and we'll hopefully be visiting them later this year, as well as a bunch of mouthpieces over to Europe. So thank you. I know we have listeners worldwide, and some of you are customers, some of you are not. But if you are a customer, thank you so much for supporting our business. And because you do that, you support this podcast. So if you have a equipment need, you're interested in a new horn, a new case, a new mute, or you just don't know what you need, but you're having issues with your equipment, feel free to reach out to us. I had a great customer this morning. He was a doctor, 49 years in a private practice. Can you imagine that? This client, just dedicated his life to helping people as a doctor. Very inspirational individual. I won't get into all his personal details, but I really enjoyed talking to him, and just makes music for fun. Had a band back in high school and college that he ran, played trumpet, and has been coming back for 4 or 5 years now. And it was really, really a cool experience getting to work with him. Helped make me, beautiful sound. Loved making music, no interest at all in playing for people or anyone just other than his own enjoyment. But he said, he loves the sound of Charlie Spivak and Bunny Berrigan and, just those great trumpet sounds from the past. So it was really cool working with him. And, a number of times he said, well, I'm just an amateur. I'm not that good, this and that, and I said, look, we're all the same. We're all musicians. And some of us like making music just for ourselves. Some of us like making music for other people. And some of us like doing that for money or not. But when it comes down to it, we're all musicians. We all have the same goal in mind. And, the satisfaction and the fulfillment of knowing we've gotten that client one step closer to their goal means the world to us. So anyway, I thought I'd share that story. I don't say a lot about some of the interactions I have here. Maybe I'll do that in the future. But that's enough for today. I know I have a wonderful guest today, and Dave Douglas, talking about a guy who does everything and has changed the face of trumpet playing and jazz and music and how we describe things, which we'll get into. But before I get to Dave's interview, I do want to mention this is an audio only. We've had some video ones in the past. So if you're watching this on YouTube, don't turn it off because you can't see Dave and I. You can imagine us talking to each other. But you can listen to the full interview on YouTube. And obviously, if you listen to this in your car or on the treadmill, you're not missing anything anyway. So this podcast, this interview will be audio only. Okay, let's get right to my interview with Dave Douglas. Dave Douglas is a New York-based trumpeter, composer, educator, and entrepreneur celebrated for his stylistic range and creative depth of work. Leader of more than 75 recordings and composer of over 500 published works, Dave has earned a Doris Duke Artist Award, Guggenheim Fellowship, Aaron Copland Award, and 2 Grammy nominations. His current projects include the rotating ensemble Gifts, the co-led band Soundprints with Joe Lovano, and numerous genre-spanning collaborations such as Overcome and If There Are Mountains. A sought-after composer, he has received commissions from major arts institutions worldwide, with recent premieres including Facts and Fictions for Alarm Will Sound and Psychopomps for Ensemble Sticks. Douglas is a co-founder and president of the Festival of New Trumpet Music, on faculty at the New School and Manns, and beginning a 2-year residency at Malmo Academy of Music in 2025. In 2005, he founded Greenleaf Music, an influential independent label, publishing platform, and home to his acclaimed podcast, A Noise from the Deep. And now, without further ado, here's my interview with Dave Douglas. Well, I'm so excited today to have joining me on the other side of the bell, Dave Douglas, all the way from New York. Dave, how's it going?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, an absolute honor, and also fellow podcaster. It's great to have you on and talk. Let's start with the trumpet because you do so many different things. Let's start with how you started with the trumpet, but you started on piano, correct? First, that was your first instrument?
I did. You've read my Wikipedia page, and that's good. But yeah, it is true. I did start with piano lessons, as so many musicians do, at least in my era. I think it's different now, and we can talk about that. Education for young musicians changed a lot. But, I had your typical classical style piano lessons, and I sort of hated them because I don't know why. I can't explain this, but I was always sort of improvising from the beginning. Like I would play what was on the page, and then my attitude would be, well, I just played it. Why would I play it that way again? Which, yeah, when you're 5, doesn't go over big with the classical piano teacher. So actually, it's kind of a funny story. My father was an amateur musician, played a lot of different instruments, and he played kind of what I would call like family parlor piano, like light standards and holiday songs, and he learned them from his mother. And when I was 7, he was always sort of buying instruments. He played banjo and guitar and Baroque recorders and all kinds of Appalachian bluegrass type instruments. When I was 7, he was at a yard sale and he saw a trombone for sale, and he bought it thinking he would teach himself trombone and I would be the accompanist because I had now been playing piano for 2 years. So hating the piano lessons as I did, within one afternoon, the trombone was mine, and I graduated to being a horn player which allowed me to quit the piano lessons. And I did play trombone for 2 years until I was 9. During that time, I was too small to reach all the positions, but I loved playing a horn. So when I was 9, I wised up in my infinite 9-year-old wisdom and changed to trumpet. Part of it was that by that time I was in the public school band, which played standard fare, what you play in elementary school, middle school band.
Yeah.
But all my friends played trumpet and they always had the melody and the trombones had the long notes. And I was like, I want to play the melody. What am I doing wasting my time with these long notes over here?
Isn't that interesting? Like at such a young age, you have that connection, one, to improvising and that kind of curiosity, and also wanting to play the lead lines, play the melodies.
Wanting to play the melody, but also, music as a social activity. The fact that my friends were getting the good parts was sort of like, I want to hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. And that's when I started trumpet. And it's been a long road. It wasn't easy for me, the trumpet. And even though I had private lessons and I came through middle school and high school playing, the technique was always a challenge for me. And as I started listening to music as an engaged listener, let's say around 12, 13, 14 years old, what happened to me musically was that I was listening to a lot of modern jazz. I gravitated towards it because my father had a pretty broad record collection, and he had the Smithsonian collection of classic jazz, which was so astutely chosen by Martin Williams in the late 60s, early 70s. So the last few sides of that collection was Cecil Taylor and Ornette Coleman and John Coltrane and Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis and Eric Dolphy, tracks that still live with me in my musical memory, even now. So I was playing trumpet in band and I had lessons, but I was also listening to this music where I wasn't thinking about the trumpet at all. And in retrospect, I sort of feel like maybe that was the challenge for me chops-wise. I wasn't listening to music where I was thinking, oh, I want to play like that. My listening was completely unconnected to practicing and being a horn player. It wasn't until years later that I realized, oh, you know what? I play trumpet and that recording has trumpet, and maybe I ought to think about connecting those two things. It wasn't really until many years later that I made that connection.
Interesting. So like your approach where your training was just purely pedagogical, there wasn't a connection to a musical outcome or...
It's basically,
yeah.
And then as high school came in and I started playing in stage band, and so there were situations where there might be little improvised solos, but it was nothing like the maelstrom of Ornette Coleman free jazz or Cecil Taylor Enter Evening, or as my listening expanded, Gentle Giant, or Frank Zappa, or all kinds of progressive rock and soul. Stevie Wonder was just a fascination, and modern classical music. I loved Igor Stravinsky, even though I didn't know anything about it. I loved Petrushka and I loved L'Histoire du Soldat, but I never, until years later, realized, oh my God, that's like an incredible trumpet solo that's written in there, And then I would hear people, when I got to conservatory, I'd hear people playing it and I'd go, why are you playing that from that thing that I had on a record when I was 12 years old? Like I didn't have anyone in my life who pointed out, this is that, and that is this. There was one jazz educator, a pianist named Tommy Gallant, who showed me how to play voicings on the piano, a little bit about writing, and who I think in retrospect, very carefully didn't point me towards any particular trumpet players. I just took them all in. I didn't really think about it very much. I think maybe as a composer that has given me some openness. I don't know.
Fascinating. So you bring up, going into conservatory. Was that a easy choice for you? Did you, even though you're kind of struggling with the technique of the trumpet, obviously surrounding yourself with music, inspired by music, was a path in music an easy choice?
It was an obvious choice. I couldn't think of anything else that I wanted to do. And I made the choice early without any logical sense of career path or whether I was any good or music was just what I did. I went to a fairly elite high school where everyone was applying to Harvard and Yale and Brown and the Ivies. And I only applied to one school. And the advisors were, I had good grades. They were like, you could really be somebody. And I was like, yeah, maybe I could. And I'm applying to Berklee College of Music. I didn't have a safety school. That was it. So if I hadn't gotten in, I don't know what I would have done, but I did get in. And I went straight from high school to Boston.
Why did you choose Berklee?
My high school was in New England. And so I had been, during my senior year, I'd been going in once a week to have private lessons in Boston. So I knew Boston a little bit. I knew some of the musicians who were going to Berklee. But at that time, and I got there in, 81. At that time, it was sort of the place to go to do what I was envisioning doing. 1981, when I got there, The Man with the Horn, the Miles Davis comeback album, had been released a month before I got to Berklee. So everyone I knew was obsessed with that record, and we were playing the tunes from that while we were learning the earlier repertoire at the same time. But I felt like I was stepping into a world of people who were interested in current music and pushing things forward. There was a detour that I didn't mention that got me there, which is my junior year in high school, so 14, 15. I did a school year abroad in Barcelona, in Spain.
Wow.
And it completely changed my outlook. I had never met any people my age that were interested in the music I was interested in, that were playing. And I got to Spain and I fell in with this group of people my age, 15, 16-year-olds, who were playing standards and playing original music. And that was when the first time I felt like, oh, these are my people. These are people my age interested in Art Blakey and Weather Report and Miles Davis and playing original music. So when I came back to my high school in New Hampshire for senior year, I was a very different person. I had this new sense of not only the experience of the world, but also of what I wanted to do creatively. Wow. And that was sending me towards Berklee for sure.
So, and that's the foundation you had going into Berklee then. I mean, you stepped out of your comfort zone, traveled the world literally, met people that inspired you, and
yeah.
It sounds like that's the kind of life you wanted to live, or that kind of career you wanted to have, so to speak.
A creative life, yeah.
Creative life, creating your own music, surrounding yourself with like-minded creatives,
being
things like
curious,
that.
Making new things, being a little unsettled as to the definitions of things.
Yeah.
What is classical and what is pop and what is jazz? That was always an open field for me, an open question.
Yeah. And what are labels anyway? The deeper question. We try to find things in music that, but that'll be a whole other podcast. Actually, you probably talk about that a lot on your podcast, talking to the
I talk to a lot of different artists, and I try not to get into style and genre and, categorization, but we talk a lot about process. And so it does bring up the fact that a lot of creative artists have had to confront or think about, where does my music fit? And what does this all mean? And the big questions,
the deeper stuff.
Something instead of nothing. But this is a trumpet podcast, so we want to go there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We can get there. And I do want to deviate from the timeline a little bit because obviously we're talking about your youth and now looking back with the context and also the teaching experience you've had over the last, decades. Yeah.
I want to go there with you, but I feel like I'll forget if I don't put a bookmark in here.
Of course, go for
To
it.
mention that I was, even at this time, by the time I got to Berkeley, I was still an atrocious trumpet player. But we'll need to go back there.
Yeah,
Wasn't Alan Woods.
Well, and with that being said, so now looking back at with the context that you have of your life and as a teacher, what would either you have done different or an advice to a private instructor who had a student like yourself?
Well,
How would you have connected young Dave to the music, connecting the pedagogy, the trumpet playing side of things to the inspiration you get from the music you're listening to? What would you have done differently? Or how would you advise a teacher to have a student like you teach differently?
wow, that's a really deep question. That's a really good question. And I've thought about it a lot. And of course, I don't think there's any simple answer when you ask a deep question like that.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Go in ways. And I'm sure you have thoughts about it too. And probably all your listeners do. Since I've been involved in sharing music with a lot of young musicians, I've thought about that a lot. What would I have said to 19-year-old Dave? What would have helped? And I think that when you started your question, I thought you were going to say, what would you have done differently having gone straight off to Berkeley? And I have some other answers to that.
Yeah.
We can get to.
Yeah.
But as far as what I say to all the young musicians I meet, I think is to, more than directing them or giving them advice, it's to ask them, what do they want to do? What are they listening to? What do they hear? And how does that impact the plans that they have in the music? And that could be career plans. It could be technique plans. It could be conceptual plans. But I feel like I was never asked what I wanted to do in the pedagogical world. A few great teachers did. But I find very often, even with master's students at the new school, which is primarily the teaching that I'm doing now, very often the question, what do you want to do, feels like a confrontation. If a young musician has never been asked, they've always been told, it's a lot more comfortable to just do the assignment and check the box than to have to sit in front of a blank piece of music paper and confront the question, well, what am I here for? What am I going to make? What am I creating? We know that the blank page is the biggest threat to our existence as a species. I'm only half kidding. It's dangerous to be in front of a blank page. And so for me, and I think this might have helped me at the time, to just ask, okay, how do we think about what we want to do? I'm giving you the permission to find your own voice and your own thing. Let's work on that. I think that would have helped me a lot. And I've seen it help a lot of young musicians. Not everyone, we're all different. Everyone's going to find a different place in the field. And so there's nothing wrong with being asked, okay, what is it you want to do? And you say to me, I want to be the best third trumpet player in the world. That's still a creative, and that's like, wow. Someone said that to me and I was like, I've never heard anything more specific as a career goal than that.
Yeah.
And my hat is off.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you have that figured out. So let's work on that. And you may become the best third trumpet player in the world. And then once you've done that, you may feel like, okay, there are further places I'd like to go. And you may discover that, and let's prepare you for that, for a life of learning.
But it gives you a why. And then once you have that why, then that connects you to, okay, well, now I'm not just playing Arbans. I'm playing Arbans with a purpose, or I'm playing these patterns.
Right. How do I teach myself to ask the important questions? Which playing Arban every day, every page, there's important questions. It's just, is your mind there to engage? What is it? There's a famous saying about, was it Wilmer Wise who said, make sure brain is engaged before putting mouthpiece in gear, something like that.
It sounds like Wilmer. Yeah. So, well, I mean, so you brought up the blank page and that one of the threats to humanity and society. I mean, what tips do you have, like when you face a blank page and you're having problems to get the first?
Oh, wow. Well, I try not to face the blank page. I try to go into any writing session with some ideas about what my goals are and what I'd like to do. And I make up little limitation exercises for myself that are based on the concept of whatever it is I'm trying to write, so that I'm not just staring at a blank page and waiting for the muse to land on my shoulder. You have to be ready when the muse does land on your shoulder, because if you're not, the muse may not come again. But the muse may not come anyway, so you need to be there prepared to do the work and come up with a way to engage creativity and welcome in ideas. For me, that comes from defining my space. First of all, early in my career, maintaining an openness to different kinds of music and different ways of thinking about music. So I would say that I came up as a jazz player and learned to do that pretty well. And then at a certain point in my playing career, I felt like, okay, there's got to be more to it than going to the gig and playing the head really well and playing a solo as close to Woody Shaw as I can possibly get, and then playing the head out and going home. And that's what opened me up to writing and thinking, okay, this can't be the only context. So I have to open myself up to whatever possibilities are there. And that took me beyond the limitations of style and genre and classification, categorization. But it also took me into places where I could explore ideas about writing, techniques about writing for a band of improvisers that were novel, that were new, that became something of my own practice through doing it.
There was something more there. I love it. Just playing the head well and playing as close to a Woody Shaw. That's a great line. But it's exactly it. And I mean, nothing, no ill will to people that are learning jazz and playing jazz, and especially in that, that kind of traditional style.
Great masters. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not putting anybody down.
Yeah. How many jam sessions around the world are you hearing that on whatever instrument those folks are playing? And it's great. You go and you hear Beethoven 5 and orchestra play it, and that's great. And there's great, that music's still there. But the fact that you heard, that you conceptualize that there is more, there's another level.
You mentioned jam sessions, and those are really important because it's a place where jazz players go and there's a common language. You can play with people that don't speak the same spoken language as you, and yet you both know tunes. And you know how the harmony works and how the form works and what's the etiquette of how to play in a jam session ensemble. And then I felt like, okay, those rules are great and they're there for a reason. But in original music, I felt like, okay, I've got to flip the script about every one of these assumptions about the music. Why don't two people ever solo at the same time? Why theoretically is the tempo the same all the way through the piece? Theoretically. Why is the piece in the same key the whole time? Why do we always play the written melody at the beginning followed by the improvisations? Why, after having played the head, it's usually there's some horn solos, then there's a piano solo, then maybe a bass solo, and then maybe trading with the drums. Well, why don't the bass player and the drummer ever get to go first and have their own solos? Why don't the horn players ever comp for the rhythm section? There's a million, the more you open it up. And the more I felt like I'm not trying to destroy anything or shoot anything down. I'm just trying to open, wow, what could I do that would be different? And who changed my life in that regard is Booker Little. The record that he made called Out Front at a key point in my development. I heard it late at night on a drive home from a gig, and I realized that he was asking all those questions and posing answers and making through composition and really making poetic and beautiful language with a sextet in a way that was different than everybody around him at the time.
Wow. This is fun stuff.
And I do want to get back to the trumpet. Not that none of that related to the trumpet, but I'm curious because obviously you have figured out how to play the trumpet. And when we last left off our conversation, you said you were a terrible trumpet player still.
Yes.
So how did that page turn? How did you figure it out? Was it a teacher involved?
Yes, a couple of teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So at Berklee, it was really big. I learned a lot of music and I met a lot of people. My roommate, my freshman year, was the drummer Billy Kilson, who's gone on to play with Dave Holland and hundreds of other great artists.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both practicing the music from Miles Smiles in the practice rooms at the same time. And I realized, okay, here's people who are really focusing in on the music. So it was great. But it was so big that as a trumpet player, I did fall through the cracks. And I was the kind of kid who I like to keep my head down and do my own thing. And I'll admit I was a little bit of a pot smoker at the time, and maybe, I don't know, no judgments, but I was just kind of getting through. And I had a trumpet teacher who, and I'm not going to name his name here on this podcast, but it is public knowledge, who taught me for the whole 2 semesters. And at my last lesson told me, you really just don't have it. You should quit trumpet and do something else. Which really pissed me off. It was really disappointing. And, I didn't think this at the time, but in retrospect, I feel like, wow, that was like a whole school year that you weren't able to help me. And it didn't occur to you that maybe you could send me to someone else or have that conversation with me earlier and face it head on.
Yeah.
So, again, in retrospect, at the time, it was just, I was pissed and angry. And I felt like, I wonder how many other kids he has said that to over the years. He still teaches there over 40 years later. Anyway, it was my impetus to drop out of Berklee altogether, because New England Conservatory, as you probably know, was only a few blocks away down the road from Berklee. And I knew that John McNeil was teaching there, and I'd heard good things about him. And I also felt like probably New England Conservatory, being a conservatory, would be more musically rigorous than Berklee. I didn't realize at the time that I was just falling through the cracks because I was kind of go along, get along. It was some of that. But I think in my anger, I left that lesson and walked down the street to New England Conservatory and just said, what do I have to do to apply? And it was probably May or June. And I managed to transfer my credits and get in for September.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Retrospect. Right.
Yeah. Life-changing.
Life-changing. And the fact that I was able to act so fast and actually get it done. I don't even remember how I did it. I had a funny summer in Boston where I practiced 8 to 10 hours a day. I could still get into Berklee. So I practiced Arbans all day, every day. And then I had a job at Wendy's, the fast food restaurant, at evenings and nights. And that was my entire summer. I became a vegetarian. I learned how to have a job. And I just practiced all day. And it was infuriating because, you're a trumpet player. Sometimes the issues are more fundamental than just putting in 8 hours on Arban every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I was practicing jazz and practicing routine and basics and all the things in Arbans, and I just wasn't getting better. And it was a real, tragic moment in my life. I couldn't imagine a lower trough of this purgatory, just practicing all day and not getting anywhere, and then going to work at a fast food joint. It's really, in retrospect, so many people have it worse, but at the time you can imagine. And I'm sure anybody listening to this who's a trumpet player knows that feeling, that downward spiral of, oh, I really can't play. And then of course that makes it worse. And then you're like, oh, now I can't even get a note out. And then the next thing you know, you can't even play the horn. And that was kind of terrifying. So when I did finally get to Berklee, maybe all those hours at Arban had helped. But the big thing that changed for me, John, was that John McNeil heard that I had an ear for improvising, heard that I didn't have the chops to pull it off, but he could tell that something was there.
Like right off, like first lesson?
First lesson.
Yeah.
He made a deep, dark joke, which I will tell here. John is gone now, God bless his soul, so he can't get canceled for this. But in my first lesson, he put on the J.B. Abersol backup band tape and had me play along to Stella by Starlight.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to play all my deepest, most sophisticated, heavy stuff. I can't even imagine what it sounded like. Thank God there's no recording that I know of. Anyway, we get to the end and he stops and there's a long silence. And I'm like, what's he going to say? You know, it's like, went on for a long time. I don't know if you ever met John.
I think I met him at an ITG at some point years ago.
Deadpan, sharp humor.
Mm-hmm.
And finally he sighs and he looks at me and he goes, do you know where I can get any heroin? And to this day, I don't know if he was looking for pharmaceutical advice or it was just that I'd played so bad that he needed something. And I asked him years, you know, I was friends with him for years. I asked him years later, what did you mean by that? He would never gave it up. He never
gave it up.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I assume it was because I was pretty sad.
Yeah.
So John had a method of teaching bebop, teaching playing over harmony that was super effective for me and a lot of people I've talked to subsequently. Also, John introduced me to the Carmine Caruso, which I'd never even heard of. So he gave me the 6 notes, he gave me some exercises, and I took to it right away, and I did it religiously. I was used to practicing. I just didn't know what to practice.
Yeah, 8 to 10 hours a day, yeah.
And then routines clicked. Like within a month, I had chops. I could play consistently above the staff. I could execute ideas. It was magic for me. After a year of New England Conservatory and John, I decided everyone here in Boston, their attitude is, I'm just going to practice so I can get good enough to move to New York. And I decided, even if I move to New York, I'm still going to have to practice. So I might as well just cut the middleman and just bite the bullet and go. So I did. I took a year off and then I moved to New York, got all my credits transferred to NYU. And I was in independent study where I got to study with Carmine Caruso weekly.
Directly.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's what did it for me, was studying with Carmine and that discipline.
And quitting Wendy's, right?
I did quit Wendy's.
Well, so I mean, take us through Carmine. I mean, we've had a few Caruso students in the past, but
yeah,
I mean, everyone knows the 6 notes. It's fairly common knowledge, but what I found is everyone had a different experience with Carmine.
Yep.
Do you remember your first lesson with him?
Oh, I don't know if I remember the first lesson, but they were all the same. He was gruff. I mean, it was the last 2 years of his life. I'm forgetting now, but you know, he was over 80. He sat in a upholstered chair that looked like it had been there for 60 years. When he first started renting that studio, there was an old sign that said trumpet lessons 25 cents, which I think was his first, first put up his shingle. He would have on those heavy ear coverings that they wear, like on the tarmac at the airport, the guys direct the planes, that he had those. And so he would sit in front of trumpet players all day, every day. And he would just wash embouchures. And we would do his exercises. The only thing that would ever upset him is if you didn't do the exercise full on all the way to its conclusion. If you gave up, or if you paused, or if you took a break, or his whole thing was, no, you leave the horn on your embouchure until this exercise is through, no matter what happens, whether notes are coming out or not. You're teaching your body that this is what it's going to have to do. You're not giving it the option to cop out. And I think that, he never talked about it this way, but that applied to music to me too. If you're playing Joy Spring and you get an idea or something about your chops doesn't come out, you can't ask the rhythm section, hey, could you wait for me to get back to the top? I'll be right there. No. Time goes on, regardless of you and whatever you think is happening. So that's what those exercises meant to me. And they pulled me out. It was about executing notes very strictly in time, tapping your foot, subdividing 16th notes in your head, and then letting the embouchure do what it needed to do. I've always had sort of uneven teeth, especially on the lower side. And trumpet players know, the way your teeth are and the way your lip is has a lot to do with where the embouchure settles. And so I'd always had teachers that, oh, you need to move it this way. Oh, we're going to reset your embouchure. It needs to be higher. No, it needs to be lower. No, it needs to, I went through this so many times. Carmine never once said anything about my embouchure. He was just do the exercises. And it started in my studies with John McNeill, but it continued with Carmine that the mouthpiece found its place to where it needed to be. And I think it's still there, and, it's still a struggle. I still do routines based on Carmine's work every day. I got an update some years later after he passed in 1987. I went for about 7 or 8 years with no teacher, still doing the last lessons that Carmine had given me. But my needs changed. I was now on the road playing as a jazz soloist every night. And then during the day, I was doing these heavy lifting Carmine Caruso calisthenics. And surprise, surprise, everything fell apart. So that's when I met Laurie Frink, who had been Carmine's top student and who had developed a pedagogy of her own that was speaking the same language as Carmine, but that was going some new places. So she really, this is around 95, I went to Laurie for the first time, and she dug me out of what was happening with my overuse problems and called me an idiot suitably. And
So how did she do it? Was it, changing your approach or how you use the exercises?
Just by saying your needs are different now than they were a decade ago when you were studying with Carmine.
Okay.
Now you need to teach your chops to relax and warm up and be flexible. And so my routines now are much more just air and buzzing. And I start the day, behind me there's a trombone mouthpiece. I start the day vibrating, creating a flexibility. So I'm not muscle bound. A lot of bending exercise. I'm sure you have a lot of people who've studied with Laurie also. And she was great, and her teaching was very personalized to the individual. So Laurie came to quite a few of my gigs, and gigs that I was playing with people like Joan Zorn and Don Byron and Tim Byrne and my own bands, Tiny Bell Trio, the string group. It was new music at the time, and I was trying to do new things on the trumpet at this point. I'd connected the composing and the playing aspect, but I was doing things that were technically really challenging on the horn. So she saw what I was doing and developed some exercises to help me, and as it turned out, help a lot of people that were improvising in that direction, that in the subsequent years, that's become a much more common way to play the horn with big leaps and challenging dynamic exercises, loud, soft, high, low, all over the place, maximum flexibility. So I recommend Laurie's book that she wrote with John McNeill. It's called Flexes.
Yep.
Because I think that she, in her introduction and in the words that she wrote, she very, very clearly describes the how and the why of what she wants the trumpet student to do. And it's effective. I've seen its effect on a lot of people.
We've had a lot of folks bring that book up, whether they've studied with Laurie or not. And I have a copy that I use at home, and fascinating. Actually, short Laurie Frink story. The only time I met her was at an ITG, and one of the nice things about an ITG was I was at the bar after the exhibit hours, and somehow a friend of a friend, she came and sat at my table. And then we had a nice conversation. I forgot to meet her. And then the friend ended up having to go. And I was there, Laurie and I, for probably 2 hours, just talking up a storm And I'm the kind of person I would never have had the nerve to go up and introduce myself even, and to find her at my table and just, talk her ear off and vice versa was just I'll never forget that experience. That was probably about 20 some odd years ago.
Yeah.
But amazing player, amazing teacher. I wished I could have had her on the podcast, So speaking of which, and I always run into these problems with players like yourself, Dave, because you do so much, we can literally only scratch the surface of your career. I do want to cover that transition because you said, okay, you kind of, I don't want to say skip the line, so to speak, but by moving to New York, practicing in town to kind of get your career rolling. What did that look like? How did you start playing? How did you go from being a student who's practicing to someone who's working regularly?
Well, I would say to young people thinking about moving to New York, it was really helpful for me to be in school because I had a structure in my life, and also I had a context where I was meeting people. I wasn't just isolated and trying to go to jam sessions. I went to jam sessions, but a lot of the people that I met in school and I met through gigs that came about from friends at NYU. And I just started playing. I would meet people, and I went to a lot of informal sessions, daytime. I went to nighttime jam sessions. I practiced a lot, and I did what we in New York call club dates, what in Boston was called general business. I'm sure in LA there's another word for it. Like weddings and bar mitzvahs and
casuals. Yeah.
Casuals.
Call them out here. Casuals. Yeah.
Heard that. Yeah. I did a lot of that. And, I hated the music, most of it at the time. And I was like, okay, I got to do this to survive. But I feel like I learned a lot on those gigs, just about professionalism, about, how to sound good in any situation, how to try to, no matter how bad you feel the musical situation is, bring your best, play your best, do your best. I learned how to play any Madonna song that I had never heard in any key at any time. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that was ear training on a very deep level that I wasn't going to get in any music school. Right? Or a beam tune, the Girl from Ipanema in B. Okay, great. Got it. I think a lot of that is basic musicianship that is hard to learn if you're not just out there on the job. I used to play dinner cruises. I would play weddings, bar mitzvahs. I played a divorce once. That was great. Ren fairs, anything. It was just if the phone rang, the answer was yes. And what do I have to wear? And I met a lot of great people who went on to be important creative music colleagues on those casuals. And I feel like it made me realize, okay, even though I'm in this place where I don't know anybody and I'm playing this music that I don't particularly know or like, and it's just a job, let me be the most musical I can. And I took away a lot of great things from a lot of dark situations. So that would be my advice. Just do everything. I'll tell you a little story. I was on a dinner cruise and, we're going along, putt, and we're playing Girl from Ipanema. And we get to the bridge and there's this ferocious tenor solo. And, the changes to the bridge in Girl from Ipanema, let's just say they're a little bit interesting, colorful. And I turn around and I'm like, who the hell is that? So then on the break, I go up and it's Chris Potter. And I said, what are you doing here? And he looked at me and he goes, what are you doing here? And then it wasn't until years later that he was in my quartet and then in my quintet, and we went on to play together. But I met him playing Girl from Ipanema on a dinner cruise. So I would say to young musicians, just go to New York and do everything that you can, and you're going to meet a lot of people, and just bring your best to every situation.
Yeah. You never know who's going to be on the gig.
That's right. Or in the audience.
Yeah. So, at what point did your career evolve from doing the club dates to doing your own creative? Was there a point where you jumped over to only doing Dave Douglas stuff?
Yeah. It was December 3rd, 1993, John.
Exactly that day?
Yes. I remember it well. So I'd been going along doing a lot of creative stuff and doing the casuals and whatnot. But increasingly I was having more creative work. And by that time I was playing with John Zorn and playing with a lot of other people. So in 1993, I did a tour with John's band, and I had finally gotten a deal for my own record as a leader from Black Saint Soul Note label, the Italian creative music label. And I was on one of these casuals, and I turned to the saxophone player next to me and I said, this is the last time I'm ever doing this. This is it. In my ratty tuxedo that I never washed out of anger. And he looked at me and he laughed and he said, okay, that's great. I'll see you next Saturday. But I went home and I threw away my tuxedo, and that was it.
Literally, you threw the tuxedo out?
Yes.
Burned the bridge and
I
never
threw it
looked
in
back.
the trash. I'm not doing that anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. Years later, I bought a really nice tuxedo, but now it was for different reasons.
That's incredible. And I love that you remember the date. Like that was a turning
Very
point.
Specifically. Yeah. I remember it was like one day to the next. And I was working really hard on my own music. I already was leading 3 or 4 different bands, and I was writing music and studying music. And, I'd been through a whole heavy bunch of years of integrating 12-tone music with improvisation, with transcribing Balkan brass bands and putting that into a context where we could improvise with it, transcribing Booker Little and figuring out what made those fantastic pieces tick and how did they work and how could I apply that to the way we play now, 30 years later. And so for me to let the weddings go, I was ready to do it. I knew what it would mean, and I was prepared, and I had enough work to know that I wasn't going to let everybody in my life down.
Man, it must have been a freeing, just psychologically, creativity, moment. And that was 93. So we're going on 30 something years.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like even though I hated it and I remember to the day when I quit doing it, I've now in my creative life had to play in so many different creative situations beyond my control that I feel like that experience of having to live at wit's end and pretend to play a tune that maybe you've never heard in your life, or show up for a wedding and then it turns out it's a Greek family and they've got 15 Greek tunes that they're going to play that you've never played, and then be cool and sort of figure out what to do, and I feel like that's given me an experience to be able to be cool in creative situations where it's like, wow, okay, here's something I know. Now I welcome it because I always feel like the motivation is like, okay, wow, here's this person that's really sincere about what they're doing and I don't know anything about it and I don't understand it. And here's something that I could really like dive in and figure out what to do. Or as you ever have the feeling like if you're a soloist and you're with a new band or a new drummer or a new composer and you're in a situation where you're on stage and you're playing solo and you're suddenly like, my God, I have no idea what to do. I'm completely at a loss, right? And yet you can't fold. You can't just put the horn down and walk away. Like you're on the job. I found a lot of creative situations I've been in have those kinds of challenges, and I live for them now.
That's exciting. Oh, I love it. I love it. I was going to say, if we had 4 more hours, we start going through your discography and your own, but then also being a collaborator, not a sideman. But
this new band with the record that's coming out, the band's called Alloy, and it's the same thing. I invited Dave Adewumi and Alexandra Ridout because I love trumpet players, because years ago I had a band with Roy Campbell Jr. and Baikita Carroll, and because I wanted to write with the sound of the 3 horns and not have it be like a high note competition, but, warm and rich and harmony and blending and all the beautiful things that we love. But we get on the gig and we get in the recording and I'm like listening to the 2 of them thinking, my God, what am I going to play? Like, here comes my solo and Alexandra's like wrapping up her solo. I'm like panicking inside, which is exactly where I want to be and why I did the project. I want that pressure of not knowing. I want that feeling of nervousness because I feel like now it becomes transmuted into the playing, into the, I'm going to play with a certain sense of urgency because she just played. She's such a wonderful creative on the horn. It's so special. And what Dave Adewumi does too, it's unique new voice. And I love it. I love to platform it, but I also feel like as a player myself, I like to feel that challenge.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's coming out in August, correct? Is when it's going to drop?
September 5th is the
September
official release date, but there's a pre-order up that people can get. They come to Greenleaf Music.
We'll have the links to all that in the description and make sure folks can find that. And for our regular listeners, we had Alexandra on a few episodes ago, and I mean, she's an absolute gem.
Yeah.
I can't say enough about her. And we are scheduled to interview Dave Adewumi as well. And
right.
I'm sure that'll be a fabulous interview. I mean, again, what a promising young star. I mean,
and they're both great composers too. And these days, I think there's a value in that that's really important, that they are carrying the tradition of creativity on every level.
Is that why you chose them for this project?
I've met them over the years and heard their own groups, and I felt like not only as soloists and as conceptual thinkers, but also as collaborators, as members of ensembles, I feel like that's a real important skill that not everyone thinks about. How do you integrate yourself into an ensemble? And especially for trumpet, I think it's a challenge to think of, people out there that are playing in quintets or sextets or whatever. As a trumpet, how do you not stand out like a sore thumb? How do you fit in and blend and make your phrases add to what the rhythm section is doing? Make the feel stronger.
Yeah. We want to stick out. It's our nature.
Well, there's a time for that, for
time
sure.
and place. Yeah.
But you don't want to do that all night long, or no one's going to call you again.
Exactly. Thank you so much for your time today, Dave.
Oh, it's been a great, fun conversation.
This is definitely one we need a volume 2 at some point to get into the other areas of your career and trumpet playing. I do want to bring up the Festival of New Trumpet Music. You founded and are the president of, correct? And can you tell us what that festival is, why you decided to create it, and when the next one is?
I created it with fellow trumpeter Roy Campbell Jr., now sadly departed tragically some years ago now. But we started it, first of all, because I was invited to curate a venue for a month in, I think it was 2003. With Roy, we had played a gig with the band that was called Alloy from back then. And I said, Roy, they want me to program 30 nights, 2 slots a night. What should I do? And he said, well, why don't you get all trumpet players? And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, well, why not? And I was like, well, I don't know if there would be enough creative trumpet players to do it. So we got a cocktail napkin. We were still at the bar. And we started writing names of creative trumpet players. And within 10 minutes, we had like 5 napkins full of names, way too many to program for a month. And I'd never thought of it that way before. And I said, okay, well, this is a part of the field that's a little bit neglected. Different kinds of people, different kinds of music, not limited to genre. We could do a whole month of just people making new trumpet music. Wouldn't that be a blast? So we did. And then after it was over, I started getting phone calls. Hey, could I do it next year? And I was like, well, what do you mean next year? And then we started doing it annually. And we still do, and it's 22nd season now, and the field has grown and changed, and there's a lot more women playing now, or maybe it was the same number of women, but earlier they just weren't getting presented. I don't know, but all different kinds of music and all different experimental stuff and modern mainstream stuff and pop and Latin and you name it, and I love it. I think that on a spiritual level, anybody who's willing to dedicate their life to playing this crazy hunk of metal is all right in my book. There's something really deep about that I celebrate. Every trumpet player is different, and I try to go hear all of them every time we do it. And this year is going to be another fantastic year. We've been celebrating creative pioneers for a number of years. We give an award, Festival of New Trumpet Music Award of Recognition. We started with Leo Smith, but we flew Kenny Wheeler over one year before he passed and gave him the award. Laurie Frink got the award. Wilmer Wise, Bobby Bradford, Charles Tolliver. So living trumpet artists that are still contributing to the field. Randy Brecker, Tom Harrell, Jimmy Owens. I'm sure I'm dropping a few, but it's just goes on and on. Last year was John Faddis.
Yeah.
And this year is Olu Dara, who the great cornetist. So it just feels like something where I can give back in a field about which I know a thing or two. How to help an emerging trumpet player. We've commissioned hundreds of players over the years to do original creative stuff. It's off the beaten path for sure.
But what a way to pass on the torch and, like I said, start highlighting younger players that are, want to do the similar things that you made your career doing. And
John, I'll say something very trumpetistic. I'm sharing it with you and your listeners because we're so trumpetistic. And if anyone's made it this far through my interview, then they deserve to hear that in 2003, I had this bad habit of winning a lot of jazz awards for Trumpeter of the Year and Composer of the Year, but trumpeter for many years. And I was seen as sort of the left of center, outcast, avant-garde, downtown, for lack of a better word, creative side. And there was a well-known critic who wrote an article saying, on the trumpet, there's either Wintons or there's Daves. And I felt like, wow, that is really missing the mark. I never set myself up as some kind of anti-Wynton Marsalis. And I know Wynton, and we are cordial and friendly, and there was never any animosity there. But there was this thing that got built up in the press. And I felt like if you really feel like there's only these two ways to do it, you're just not paying attention. Because there are these hundreds, thousands worldwide trumpet players that are doing unique, personal, individualistic work. There's no way to not sound like yourself on this thing because it's your actual lip that's vibrating. So that was another part of the impetus, was to go against this idea that there's uptown and downtown.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's astounding. But I'm glad you shared that because it does put your voice out there. Who cares what the critics say?
People feel free to follow the path where it leads them. Yeah. Amazing. Well, Dave, it's been an absolute honor to have you on. Again, thank you for your time. We'll have all the links to your websites and the fontmusic.org for the Festival of Trumpets. And we'll have links to the pre-order for Alloy with you and Alexandra and the other Dave Adewumi. Absolute honor, like I said. Before I let you go, Dave, if you could leave our listeners with one last piece of advice that you would consider your best piece of advice. Oh, no rules here. It doesn't have to be about trumpet. Doesn't have to be about music. Anything you want. Oh my God.
What would that be?
So I guess this is for trumpeters and civilians.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a tough question. One piece of advice is to find some time in your day, but every day, to work on the creative aspect of whatever it is you're doing, whether it's trumpet playing or composing or being an editor or making a podcast or building trumpets. There's always a creative aspect to it that's beyond the technique and the language, and all of that is important, but just take a small moment of every day to work on your personal creative aspect of your work.
Absolutely beautiful advice. And you live that advice, since I think you were 5 years old learning the piano and knowing there was something more.
And it does accrue over the years if you do it every day.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dave. What a treat. I can't wait to meet you in person one of these days.
I would love that. Thank you. And if you ever decide that you need a round two, you know where to find me.
I'm going to take you up on that.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, John.
What a refreshing interview that was with Dave. And for a player that's so, I say, well known, but he's has his own label, he has his own podcast, he's I mean, prolific doesn't even begin to describe the amount of creativity and content and music and compositions he's put out in the world. You know, I knew this was going to be a special interview just from his first answer, where he said he started on piano and played the piece the first time and then decided to change it. He started improvising literally from the first days of his musical experience, and then went from there. So what a joy to talk to Dave. And thank you so much, Dave, for your time. I know you had a busy day, and he had a meeting with his record label right after that. And, you know, he's planning the Festival of New Trumpet Music that's happening here in a few weeks in September, he was talking about. So to squeeze our podcast in and this interview meant a whole lot. So hopefully you listeners got a lot out of his interview, no doubt. So many different things, not just about trumpet, but the journey that Dave took in terms of learning the instrument and the struggles he had. But, you know, the deeper conversations about how we define music and label things and this and that. So this is one of those I'm going to be listening back to a lot. And we just scratched the surface. So I'd love to have Dave on for a future episode to get deeper into some of these conversations. Or you can listen to his podcast, A Noise from the Deep, where he talks, he's got some great trumpet players on there, but, you know, all musicians from all walks of life on his podcast. So you can listen to 13 years of his deeper conversations. So anyway, last time, thank you, Dave. Looking forward to meeting you in person sometime. And I'm going to actually try to see if I can get a plane ticket out to New York to attend some of that Festival of New Trumpet Music here in a few weeks. See if the boss will let me out of the shop here. Thank you for listening. We have some really cool podcasts coming up. Actually, maybe I shouldn't say this. Well, I've had guests in the past that have announced things on the podcast and then they're committed to it. But I'm actually having one of our past guests interview me. I mean, it's a lot disconcerting. It's very disconcerting because a number of you have reached out through the years and said, "Hey, John, why don't you do your own podcast?" Just because we'd want to find out about you. We hear your voice every week or every month. So someone finally twisted my arm. I was going to be a surprise guest host, but we're going to reverse roles here. And I'm recording the interview next week. So I think in the next few episodes, unless I totally just have a catharsis, you'll hear me on the other side of the bell as a guest. Who else do I have coming up? Tim Larkin, who's a trumpet player, just released an album, and also fabulous composer and sound designer for video games and TV and movies and all sorts of things. That's going to be a fascinating conversation. We're doing a little foray into trumpet players that also have other careers or have combined their careers. So, of course, Tim plays trumpet and has a fabulous career as a composer. Greg Curtis, another friend of mine, fabulous trumpet player out of North Texas, among other places, who ran a recording studio built from the ground up. And so also an audio engineer, ran a very high-level studio here in LA for many years. He's coming up. Kate Moore, she just won the Pioneer Award, or was given the Pioneer Award at IWBC from the BBC Concert Orchestra. Oh, man, Lord of the Rings and Planet Earth, all the great trumpet solos in that. So really great conversation with Kate Moore. Chris LaBarbera, you know, the great Reinhardt teacher and fabulous player himself down in Florida. Oh, I'm forgetting some folks here. So I'm sorry. Bottom line is you need to hit that subscribe button. You need to hit that notification button because we have a lot of great content coming up and you don't want to miss out. All right. Well, thank you for listening and we will see you next episode. Until next time, let's go out and make some music.